Thank you for having me here today. I'll just give a short summary of the book. The novel tells the story of Benjamin Gold, a hard-drinking private eye in Cleveland who in 1952 investigates the murder of prominent local attorney Maurice Sorlin. Gold once practiced law himself, but switched professions after cracking up in Europe at the end of the war. The cops consider the Sorin case closed, but Sorin's daughter suspects a conspiracy to assassinate her father and wants Gold to get to the bottom of it. The primary suspects are the Forsytes, titans of industry from Cleveland's upper crust, who just happen to be Gold's former in-laws. I wrote The Best Assassination as a tribute to the films and novels of the 1940s and 50s, dealing with noir subjects and detectives. The one big twist is that Gold is Jewish, which was a rarity for fictional private eyes in the era. Gold is Sam Spade with shtick. He's constantly wisecracking about himself, the people he knows, and the state of the world. But he also has a serious side. This guy married into a Gentile family when intermarriage wasn't prominent. He fully assimilated into his in-laws' patrician way of life. And at the end of the day, he betrayed his family and his heritage. And he is looking for redemption, but he can't seem to ultimately achieve it. With respect to the murder, he does solve the murder. He does figure out who did kill Maurice Sorin, but he can't convince the cops and the prosecutors to go after the bad guys, given the influence and wealth that they have. So he's left to devise his own way of achieving justice. Some people say that all lawyers are frustrated novelists. And then in that vein, I would say that around 35 years ago, I wrote a political satire about a Southern senator who got himself in trouble by waxing poetic about the virtues of slavery. I tried to get it published, but it wasn't very good, so the project fizzled. And that reality check put a damper on my impulse to write for a while, but it eventually returned. And I started writing The Best Assassination 9 or 10 years ago when my youngest kid went to college and I had more free time on my hands than I knew what to do with. Project started out as a lark, but I got more serious about it the closer I got to finishing it. It took several years to write and even longer to get it published. So I think I'll stop there and open myself up to questions from Kathy and the rest of you.
Well, I think I'll get it started. Since it took you a long time to write it, was it a joy or a chore?
It was a joy, and I had always, as I said, wanted to write. And the reason this was a joy was because part of it was I was amusing myself, but also because I was able to actually realize an idea that I had for a story. I was always coming up with ideas for stories, and they would sometimes, mirror a paragraph on a page, and sometimes not even that. But this was one that I started writing, and it seemed to be going and going and going, and that was very gratifying for me. So I enjoyed doing it. At the end, it got a little hard. The work got hard, but which of course I groused about. But overall, it was a joy.
And are any of your friends or colleagues seeing themselves in the characters of your book?
Fortunately not, no. I didn't base the characters in the book on any particular people. They mostly were either creations of my imagination or they were based on characters or from the novels or movies that I saw from the 40s or 50s. That was a more likely source of character for the people in the book. So I didn't really base anybody on people that I knew. So no one's gotten mad at me yet. So that's good.
Do you consider any of the characters a lot like you?
Well, I've been asked that question a lot, and one of the ways I responded to it when I was first asked was to recite what my kids had said when we were talking about the book at a family dinner. And they said, "Dad, we know that you wrote it because the protagonist, is such a smartass." And so I would say that, I told him I thanked him for thinking so highly of me. But in that respect, his wisecracking is something that is something that I would do. So in that respect, he's like me. And he's also like me in the sense that he's, I think, almost neurotically introspective, always analyzing the right and wrong of what he's doing and whatnot. But other than that, uh, I see myself in him in certain ways. Um, but other than that, not really anybody else.
Was he your favorite character in the book?
Well, I would have to say he was, because he was the main character. I mean, I was telling the story through his eyes. So he had to be the main focus and the guy that I most wanted to realize and most wanted to satisfy as the story went on.
I bet it was fun writing about Cleveland and all the different places, like the theatrical, which isn't there anymore. And my dad used to take me there. And, other places like Otto Mosier's and Jim's Steakhouse and the Hippodrome.
Yeah,
Tell us about that.
yeah. Well, that actually was a lot of fun, and I had to do not a fair amount of research to make sure that the places that I wanted to include were actually there in 1952. And along those same lines, I had to research how you got from point A to point B in Cleveland in 1952 to make sure that the roads were such that they were still there. Um, Interesting, it's easy to see why that type of research is much easier these days with the internet than it was before, because there are a lot of resources online that maps and such. Interestingly, the most valuable source that I had with respect to this was a map of the buildings from downtown Cleveland from the 1950s that I found in all places in the archives of the University of Alabama. So that was something that I used a lot, and how it ended up there, I'll never know. But that was a lot of fun.
I'm surprised our local county archives didn't have something like that,
It may have, but I didn't find it, but I was able to
Yeah.
find it in Alabama. So God bless Alabama.
So your book is obviously based on film noir. And my dad introduced both myself and my daughter to the old movies in black and white. And we love them. But I bet you have some favorites. You mentioned Sam Spade. Any particulars?
Oh, look, I've got about 25 favorite film noir. I'm embarrassed to say how many film noir DVDs my wife and I own. Some people have vacation homes or fancy cars. We have an old film collection. And there are about 25 that I really love. Always, and so my favorites vary from conversation to conversation. I would say that always on the list are Double Indemnity and Asphalt Jungle. Two of the lesser known films that I really like a lot that I'll mention today are Railroaded and The Narrow Margin. Those are two that I really like a lot. But just I love the genre, and even a bad film noir can keep me occupied watching it. I just really enjoy the way they're structured and the point of view that they convey, which is dismal. So that must say something about me.
Excuse me. I saw one the other day with a young Perry Mason, a young Raymond Burr. That was
Well, he's in a lot of them.
Yeah.
He's a bad guy.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, he was a bad guy.
yeah.
So let's see. Her lawyer in the book is really a PI. Are you a frustrated PI?
I am not a frustrated PI, and one of the reasons I'm not is because of my aversion to this forensic technology. That stuff makes my head spin. The stuff that they're able to, I'm obviously impressed and glad they're able to do it, but it makes my head spin. And that was really one of the reasons that I chose to write about the 1950s, is because in 1950, in investigating a crime, you interviewed a witness, you maybe took some fingerprints, you reviewed some documents, maybe put something under a microscope. You didn't need an engineering degree to investigate a crime. And from my perspective, I didn't need an engineering degree to write about it. But I never had the interest really in being a PI. So this was purely, the interest purely sprung from what I was reading and watching on TV from the 40s and 50s. That was really the impetus for all of this.
The voice or tenor of your book seems to be written in the voice of a 1940s and 50s PI. And was that challenging to do or easy to do?
Well, the thing about it was that I was very cognizant of that. I wanted to make sure that the characters were speaking in the vernacular of the 40s and 50s in the way that I could ensure that it was going that way was to watch the movies from that time and to listen to what speech was. But also, again, the internet. There were a lot of sources that are available that tell you the etymologies of words and phrases. And, what's the slang for this word in 1940? Or when did this word come into use in the English language? And we would have to look those up to see. So that's how we did it. And I also have to say that the publisher of the book, when he went through it, made several corrections along those lines to say, no, you're using this phrase, that didn't fly for this era. So it was something that we were all fairly cognizant of as it went along.
To open it up to anyone on the program today, things like GAT, I had to look that up. I was reading the print copy of the book. I did not know what a GAT was. Anyone else have that experience with some of the lingo in the book? And Heather?
I certainly did. I didn't take the time to look up what some of those expressions and words meant. I was able to sort of figure it out just from the context, but I enjoyed that so much because you really did feel like you were transformed, or you went back in time and you could just hear the characters. It really brought them to life.
Thank you.
So go ahead, someone else.
No.
Oh, I was just going to ask, there are a lot of things that happen in the book that may or may not have happened to you as a practitioner, or that may have happened to some of the other lawyers on the call. Did you ever have a witness boldly lie to you? Did you ever find a smoking gun in a case? Were you ever threatened by, a party before?
Well, ever have a client lie to me? Client lie? Yeah, I've had clients lie to me all the time. But what I would say in that regard is that I'm lucky in the sense that the type of cases that I handle are usually document intensive. So I have usually a objective way that I can find out when someone's not telling me the truth. In terms of a smoking gun, when I think about that, there's one thing in particular I think about. I, relatively early in my career, handled a class action brought on behalf of season ticket holders of the old Cleveland Browns against Art Modell when he moved the franchise. And the theory of the claims for the season ticket holders was fraud and breach of contract. We were saying that he had promised that he would never move the team so long as he owned it. Well, in discovery, we got a copy of board minutes from the Browns from about 7 or 8 months before he announced the move of the team. And the board minutes said, well, if we don't get what we want from the public about a new stadium, the decision will be easy. The Browns will move. And this is while he's promising everyone he's never going to be moved the team while he is owner. That was a smoking gun. And I remember very distinctly the day that we got that, because it was like, oh my God, we had him, we thought. So that was a smoking gun that we had. So that was great. not too many times does that happen, but it's happened, occasionally, and it's great.
Any anyone on the call ever experiencing anything like that, or a party threatening them,
As for a party threatening me, I've never had a client threaten me, but I have had people in depositions come around the table, which being an inveterate coward didn't sit well with me, but that sort of thing has happened. So it's kind of comparable.
I mean, I had a lot of angry calls with opposing counsel, but they weren't in my presence. But I had clients lie to me. Unfortunately, I think we all have.
Yeah.
So let's see. Well, there are some serious issues in the book. We might as well touch on those. And one of them is the inhuman treatment of Jewish people, during the war, and the post-traumatic stress that the soldiers experienced. How did you decide to weave that into the book?
Well, I think that, for one thing, I mean, writing about a Jewish guy from the 50s who was in the service, I mean, it was kind of a natural thing that if he had been in Europe, he would have been thinking about this. Actually, that was one of the ideas that really came early in what I was thinking. I was thinking that the guy was going to be disturbed, and this was he was disturbed about the tension that rose from his intermarriage, and I wanted to draw a parallel between that and what he had witnessed in the camps and liberating the camps. It was an easy subject for me to incorporate in the book because my mother is somewhat of a Holocaust scholar. And so she has been, focused on this much of her adult life. And she actually helped found a Holocaust memorial in San Antonio, Texas, of all places. And she's written curriculum to teach about the Holocaust in public schools, so that I was fairly fluent with the concepts for this. And so it just made sense to me that if I'm bringing a disturbed guy out of the military from that era, that to incorporate some of that into it, in given how I could draw the parallel between that and how he felt about his betrayal of his heritage with his in-laws. So that's how it came about. Have I known people that I have met Holocaust survivors very cursorily over the years, but I've never ever talked to any one of them about their particular experiences. So I couldn't really say I was incorporating any of that into the story.
Yeah, well, we have a local Jewish museum, so that's also something that is of local importance, I think, too.
Mm-hmm.
So the other obvious topic in there is McCarthyism,
Mm-hmm.
And all the communism scares. And you brought that in with Dr. Bronstein and Benny's secretary, so that was just another subplot. So you had another subplot going on. What was the idea about putting that in the book?
Well, I think that to write about the 50s and not address that, particularly in 1952, would have been sort of unreal. I mean, that was something that was going on at the time. And I was trying to make sure that the book gave an accurate insight to what the time was like. And I didn't have to necessarily feature it that prominently, but when I decided to get the psychiatrist involved in the story, I was trying to think of what interesting thing could I have happen to him, and it seemed to occur to me that that would be an interesting way to tie in this other part of it. I had to temper that because I was bound and determined not to make gold political. I personally am a very political person, and I was determined not to write a manifesto. I wanted to write a novel, not a manifesto. So I didn't want to get into too much of it. But I thought that bringing that into the story would give it an interesting twist, and without having to go overboard on the ideology or anything like that. So that's how it came about.
Gotcha. Are any of these subplots or, things that happened in the book fodder for a sequel?
Well, let me tell you about the sequel. I have written the sequel, and I just got word last week that the publisher is offering me a contract on it. So that's good. And
Hey.
the sequel is not, doesn't deal with McCarthyism, but it's set 7 years in the future from the old book. And what it has to do with is a prominent local Jewish businessman in Cleveland who's accused of being a Nazi collaborator back in the war. And somehow they're expecting Gold to investigate the accuracy of this allegation. So it seems a little far-fetched, but I think it works. I don't know. I would like to write other sequels to this, other parts of the series, and I don't expect them to proceed sequentially. I don't think I have to go more than 7 years out in the next one. This novel had to be 7 years out because one of the characters had to be that far removed from the war in order to make the plot work. So that's how I decided to do that. In terms of what the others will deal with, I don't know, but McCarthyism could be one of the topics. It could be. I just
This
don't
will
know.
return. It'll turn
Pardon?
into your retirement job, and then you can write a prequel and some others, right?
Yeah, if I want to starve, it could.
Well, we'd like to have you back, wouldn't we, Helena?
Yes, definitely. And
And
I'm
let us-
kind of looking forward to the book now. So
Yeah,
Yes.
well, hopefully by the end of the year, we can get that thing out.
Gotcha. So, so let's ask everybody on the call. You've heard about his process and a little bit about the reasons why he wrote the book. What did you think of it? Did you enjoy it? Let's hear from our audience.
Well, I'll just say I haven't read it yet, Josh.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Josh and I have handled, or at least we were involved in a case together. It was pretty significant. And I was wondering if any experiences in that case may have interwoven into your thinking at the time you started the book, Josh.
Well, I have to say that the case that he was talking about was for the city of Cleveland against 21 Wall Street firms. And from that case, I got a very strong sense of what it felt like to be an underdog, because we were definitely the underdogs in that. And I think that there at certain points in the book that comes through, going against the powers that be. So in that sense, I think it did. I have to say that given the way things turned out in that case, I try to think about it as little as possible. But no, I think that experience would have influenced me, at least in that respect.
There was a good movie that came out of it, though, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. My 15 minutes of fame.
Well, I'm happy to share that I loved the book. I reached out to Josh yesterday to let him know how much I enjoyed it. I didn't know about it until about a week or so ago. I devoured it. I've had the good fortune in my career to know and work with and be mentored by lawyers in Cleveland who've been around for a while. I love stories about the theatrical. And so I was delighted when the theatrical showed up in the book. I've heard all kinds of mob stories and things from 1950s Cleveland. And as I read it, I thought, I'm surprised I haven't read the name Corrigan yet. And then there it was near the end of the book. And so that delighted me. I just enjoyed it so much. And Kathy, your questions were great. And you asked the two questions that I had. And one was about just the theme of anti-Semitism and I didn't know about the concentration camp that was referenced in the book. I did look that up and read about that. Just really heartbreaking. But so I learned something about that. And then the other thing was about the sequels. And I'm so excited. You know, I am excited, Josh, that you've already written your second book. And I'm thrilled that Benny Gold will be the protagonist, because I just love that guy. And because I know you, I had a difficult time picturing anyone but you as Benny Gold. And so
He's a
I
lot
sort of
taller
feel
than
like
I am.
it was well, I feel like I'm on with Benny Gold, and so I thought it was terrific, and just congratulations again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Feel free to jump in, anyone else. As I also agree, it would be nice to have another Benny Gold book.
I second what Heather said, that Josh wrote the book based on himself. He was Benny Gold. I also think he based it a little bit on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but he won't admit to that.
On who?
Who Framed Roger Rabbit? There's a lot of similar motifs in there.
And
Okay.
can you tell us, for someone who's never seen that movie, what you mean?
Eddie Valiant is an alcoholic, private eye, disgraced, and he has to go head to head with one of his former foes, and Christopher Lloyd, who's also a cartoon. That was just a joke, but it actually does work.
Well, this is my son, if anyone didn't surmise that. And what I would say is that the predicament or circumstance that Benny Gold finds himself in, and being a private eye against all these powers that be or whatever, is really very prevalent in the crime and detective fiction of the 40s and 50s. I mean, this is, these guys were gunslingers and who were anti-authoritarian and all these sorts of things. And, fitting that into, that was kind of what I was trying to mimic when I wrote the book, to capture that feeling. I have to admit, Dan, that I did not have that movie in mind when I was writing the book. So
obviously, I was joking, but after reading the book and going back again and watching more film noir, the plot does follow the same structure, and it's pretty impressive how well you're able to stick to that.
Thank you.
So for the audience and Mr. Cohen, as I was reading the book, I wanted the bad guys to get caught. And when Benny settled for all that money and they weren't caught, and they killed people, I was disappointed. Okay. And it's a spoiler that there will be retribution by the end of the book. But what did you guys think of his ethics? And what did you think of Benny's ethics as a lawyer doing what he did?
Well, I'll comment on that.
Okay.
They were supposed to look. This was noir fiction, so this can't be right. Absolutely prevails over wrong, and Benny was a compromised figure. He had, for his whole life, been making decisions that weren't totally consistent with what he knew to be the right thing, and what he did again at the end was compromise in a way that he shouldn't have compromised. So and when I have to admit that when the first versions of it, novel concluded without what came after that. So there was no, way that he actually worked to get things right after getting the money. It ended with him getting the money. That's great, and that's how it ended. That was very unsatisfying. So what I would say is that his ethics are dubious, but his heart is in the right place, and it gives him something to grow on, because he knows what the right thing is. He just can't seem to get there easily.
Well, I, for one, am glad that you added the end.
Yeah.
I would not have wanted the book to end with the settlement, all that.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, he resorted to underhanded ways to do it. I mean, one of the things that he did, he says in the book, you know, when he kind of cheats out on the settlement that he reached and makes this conniving deal, and he says that, you know, fraud doesn't become less fraudulent because the people who he defraud had it coming to him. And he's got to work these issues through. And so he's not experienced at being the good guy, the upstanding guy. He's got to find his way to making that his persona. So this was a first step.
So I haven't had the chance to read your book yet, but I definitely will. I just wanted to congratulate you on it. And also, I guess my question is, how long have you been writing and how long did it take you to write your book? And it's wonderful.
Well, thank you. It took me about 4 or 5, 3, 4, maybe 5 years to write the book. I'm a very slow writer because believe it or not, I handwrite out most of what I write before I put it in the word processor. And I usually like to get it to a fairly polished point before I'll move on to the next thing. Unfortunately, I do a lot of my legal writing the same way, so it doesn't make my partners particularly happy. It actually took longer to get it published because after I finished the book, it took a year to get an agent. The agent took a year trying to sell it to big publishing houses. Then he dropped me after he couldn't make a sale. Then I took several months to add back into the manuscript what he had taken out to make it suitable for a larger audience. And so and then I started peddling it myself to smaller publishers. It didn't go anywhere, and I was just about to give up when I found a book that was kind of like mine. So on a lark, I just called the I contacted the publisher of that book and asked if he had an interest in reading mine. And as it turned out, he had just broken his leg and was laid up in bed and had nothing to do. So he said he would read mine, and the rest, as they say, is history. So that's how I was able to make it work. But overall, it was close to a 10-year proposition to get this from start to finish.
Those other
Wonderful.
publishers are going to regret it.
Yeah, it's great. Congratulations. I look forward to reading it.
Thank you.
So you mentioned, the process, and we didn't ask you earlier, how many versions did it go through? And did you have an editor or multiple editors working on your work?
I went through probably, 10 versions. And I, at one point, had an editor look at it. One point, a professional editor look at it, who made some, I think, important suggestions. Mainly I had my wife, who was an important commenter on the book. And believe it or not, my 90-year-old mother, who's a published author in her own right, read the book. And although there was something lost in the time warp with some of the stuff she said, but she gave me important insights. So those were the main things. My law partners, 2 of them, read the book and commented. So they were editors of sorts as well. So that's who I was getting input from on the book.
And have you thought about polishing up that one you started a long time ago?
I have to tell you that there's only one copy of it left. And I think that one of my current law partners has this. It almost makes me cringe to look at it. And so I do not want to polish it up. I would like to burn it, but everybody has a first one, I guess. So no, I I would like to give it a decent burial. So that's what I want to do.
So are movie plans in the works?
Yeah, from your mouth to God's ears. I don't even know how to go about that. I know that the contract that I have with the publisher leaves the movie rights with me. So if anything's going to happen, it's going to be on my initiative. But I know generally what you would have to do, but I don't know how about. I haven't looked for an agent or tried to write up the what you would have to write up to make a submission. So as of now, nothing. But I'm not so sure that it would be a great movie.
Fun movie. If let's ask everyone, including you, who would play Benny Gold?
Well, I have a definite idea, but I'll go last. If anyone
Okay.
else.
How about anybody else? See anybody as you were reading the book?
I just could not think past Josh Cohen. So I'm very excited to hear who he thinks should play Benny.
Well, if you think Josh Cohen, then Albert Brooks would be a good fit.
Yeah. Who let you on this call, Dan?
One of
I
my
can just-
lawyer neighbors sent me the link.
I can disconnect him.
No, I think that Adrian Brody would be a good fit for Benny Gold because he just physically he's the right fit, and I think he would have the right delivery. He may be getting a little old, but
I'm not familiar with him. Tell us what he's done that we might know.
What is Adrian Brody?
Sorry, I don't know him. Anybody else on the call? No.
I think he
Dan, what
was
has he
in the
done?
Piano Player, wasn't he, or something?
Yeah, the
along those-
pianist. He was in a Wes Anderson movie, The Darjeeling Limited.
Pianist.
A lot of the Bloom Brothers, a lot of darker stuff, dark comedies.
He
Gotcha.
won the Academy Award several years ago for
Yeah.
that. He played the pianist, wasn't it, in Warsaw, I think,
Right.
during World War II.
Nothing but the best for the best assassination.
It's quite a scene when he got his award.
Gotcha. So for those joining us, I can ask you guys more questions if you'd like. What did you think about the portrayal of lawyers in general or the police or, the prosecutor's office? I mean, I thought we got a bad name. What do you guys think? Anyone?
Yeah, I agree with you, Kathy. It was frustrating at times, especially at the end when finally Benny gets the evidence he needs and nobody will listen to him. So yeah, it was frustrating.
Anybody else? Elena, other questions?
No, I was just gonna say, I'm glad you told me about the book and it was the first one that I did with you guys, because I never read in this genre, and being a librarian for as long as I have, I thought I kind of touched everything. And when I got the book, I'm like, not sure if I'm gonna like this. But once I started it, it just drew me in so much, and I just loved the way Benny was so snarky. It's it was just a lot of fun, and I think I like the character because even though he tried to do the right thing, he was flawed, and just like all of us, we always, I think, try to do the right thing, but none of us are perfect. We all have our failings, and that made him a little bit more endearing. But I do have a question about the next book. Are you going to still have some of the historical settings in Cleveland and Ohio, or are you going to have a connection with Chicago as well, since he seemed to go to Chicago for a little while?
This next book is set almost exclusively in Cleveland with one junket to a small town in New York. So it's mostly in Cleveland, and there are landmarks and things like that, restaurants and stuff from Cleveland. Not quite as many as in the first book, but there are some, yes. I mean, that seems to be what a lot of people have really enjoyed about the book. So I was very mindful to include that in the sequel as well, the references to Cleveland.
Yeah, even as a little kid, my dad was a lawyer in town and he used to take us to those kind of places. You know, like I went to the theatrical as a child. I went to, you know, Otto Mosher's as a child, you know, some of these other places, Jim's Steakhouse, you know, they were lawyer hangouts, I guess, back then. It seemed anyways.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it, even though, you know, I was a kid. It still brought back great memories. Anybody else visit any of the places in the book and have those memories? Am I the only one? I must be old, huh?
No, I used to go to the theatrical after I moved to town. And when I was a kid, I went to Euclid Beach all the time because I lived as a kid in Cleveland. But some of them, the only ones I hadn't been to were some of the department stores from the 50s that I think closed before I was born. But all the other ones I had at least been to at some point. So that was good.
I am Josh's wife, Marcy, and it's great to hear this discussion. He has a lot of fun writing, and it's impressive to watch the process. And it's great to hear the discussion of what people enjoyed about the book and the character. And Benny definitely is part of Josh. So thanks for this. It was great.
Josh,
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, now you were talking about all the movies that you enjoy and everything, and I'm sure between cases, it's hard to find time to do any reading, but do you have any authors that you enjoy or any genres you enjoy reading?
Well, I enjoy, I guess what I should talk about is the authors that I read from the 40s and 50s that influenced. And I read and have read and still read very heavily from that time. And the authors that I would say that I'm most impressed with from that time are James Cain, Patricia Highsmith, David Goodis, Raymond Chandler. I mean, these guys, I was amazed when I started reading this stuff that none of them, I was an English major, and that none of these people had made it onto the syllabus of the American literature courses that I had, because some of the writing is just exquisite. So they were I was very impressed with some of that stuff. Some of the other stuff is not that great. It's fun, but it's not high literature. But I still, as often as not, when I'm reading something from that era and in that genre. I also, to be honest, read most of the other time I'm reading nonfiction. So, which doesn't really inspire anything but angst. So that's what it is.
Other questions from our audience today about the book or of the author? Anything? Well, I guess, Josh, we are so grateful for today's program and you joining us. I thoroughly enjoyed reading your book. I would love to have you back when your next book comes out to be part of your marketing. Looks like Marcy is thanking everyone. The discussion was great. Thank you. So with that, I think we can probably conclude the program. What do you think, Helena?
That sounds good to me as well. And I'm looking forward to your book as well.
So keep us in the loop, please, Mr. Cohen.
Yes.
I will definitely do so. Thank you all for your comments.